Hey everybody, good morning. It is day 85 for spiritual healthcare. Welcome to Monday morning. Welcome to Monday morning. It's good to see everybody. I hope you guys had a great weekend this weekend. It's been really busy. It's been crazy busy around Edmonton. I don't know how you guys have been, but it is good to see all of you. It is, as I say, 10 a.m. yet again. Spiritual healthcare, day 85, everybody, day 85, good morning. It's good to see people coming in and logging in. It's nice to see you, all of you. This is going to be it's going to be an interesting day because we've had a couple of really great questions come in, and I'm looking forward to addressing all of them today, or as many as we can anyway. Good morning, Dan. Good morning, Sally. I will say good morning to Patricia. She is at work today. She's a really good friend of mine here in Edmonton, and she has gone back to work today. So she'll be catching up later. Good morning, Lori and Brandy and Shadow and Kaz. Nice to see you. Kaz says he did some photography and hiking. Sweet. Oh, that's awesome. Kaz has a really great Instagram page, you guys. He's got really, really cool photos and stuff like that on there. Yeah, check out Instagram because it's really good. It's nice to see everybody this morning. I hope you guys, as I say, had a great day. I hear the states this morning are warm. You guys are like super hot in some areas. I keep hearing stories about the temperature down there. Good morning to Connor. Nice to see you. Good morning to everybody. It is good. It's just really good to see you guys this morning. It's going to be a warm day here too. Good morning, Nigel. Nice to see you. Yay! And the comments are working now. That's really great. Brandy says that she and Shadow watched the talk with the Rhine about energy healing, and she said it was so amazing and geekily nerdy, and totally, and that's the great thing is that, so all the people like in parapsychology and stuff like that, we're all nerds, like all we're all nerds. It's funny. It's really funny. Like, we'll get into like an academic setting or whatever, and you can literally like watch the conversation turn into this like nerd fandom. It's the funniest thing, but everybody's super nerdy. It's like it's a trait, I think. I don't think you can like really get into parapsychology without having that fan kind of pop culture side. I think there's something to that anyway. I really do. It's really kind of funny because when I look at so many of the talks and in movies and things like that, like what ends up getting blended into to film in regards to parapsychology, there's such a crossover. Like films like Ghostbusters and shows like Sci Factor and even Star Wars. I want to do this coming year. I'm looking to do a presentation because I always do a lot of the fan expos and Comic Cons and whatnot, because I love presenting there. I love the audiences. I love being there. I love the environment. I love the stories. So I always do a lot of the Comic Cons and fan expos and do talks on. The last one, of course, was ritual, exorcism, and film and television. But I did another one a number of years back called Belief, and it was paranormal research in film and TV. And I'm hoping to do one on Star Wars coming up. About the Force and things like that, because it all crosses over, it all blends together. It's very interesting. People don't realize like how much it actually becomes intertwined, but it's really, really neat. So anyway, we got some really great questions today, and I wanted to grab two of them. One was on hauntings and cemeteries, which we have not touched on before, and the other was about unfinished business. And I wanted to grab both of them because I think they tie in together, and I thought they were both really brilliant. So the first question actually came today, was actually posted on a forum. And I thought this was really, really interesting. It was, if your house sits next to a cemetery, is your home haunted? So this is a big real estate question. And it was funny, I used to work with an investigator years ago who dealt with hauntings and real estate and things like that. Because oftentimes what would happen is these people would claim that their house was haunted and then try to get a discount, or they would, there's a bunch of legalities that went into it. There's a bunch of legalities. Brandy is saying, can I do a talk on Harry Potter? Yeah, I think we should. Actually, that would be super fun. We should do that on spiritual healthcare too. We should do a Harry Potter thing. Yeah, I'm a huge Harry Potter nerd. I'm a Slytherin because I have Galen, so I know a guy. So I always identify with Slytherin. So anyway, the idea that cemeteries and homes being haunted are kind of all tied into one thing has been around for a very, very long time. The idea of people passing away and coming back from the grave, I think, is where that began to tie in. And it's interesting because when you look at old traditions and cultures, such as like in Scandinavia, and all sorts of places and locations all over the world throughout history, we see this fear of the dead coming back. Connor wants to know if he can be a guest on the one with Harry Potter. Yeah, absolutely. So Connor is like a Harry Potter connoisseur. Like, he is expert. Yeah, Connor, I'm gonna message you and we're gonna set that up because that would be fantastic. So there's this interesting tie-in between the idea and the fear of the dead coming back and cemeteries and being haunted and things like that. The reality is quite different. It's really interesting because the reports of cemeteries themselves being haunted, it's not a crazy common thing. And a lot of people think that automatically, if there's dead bodies, there's got to be ghosts. And that's really not the case at all. Usually what we end up getting is places that have strong emotional ties or a lot of human activity that tend to be the places that are more frequently haunted. Partly because, you've got human activity, there's potential for interaction, and you've got, of course, more observation and more witnesses. But at the same time, having that communication and that interaction, that spirit interaction, is something that's really, really common. So, and wanted by non-physical. So if your home is sitting next to a cemetery, does it mean it's haunted? No, not at all. And when we look at a lot of cemetery hauntings, we see a lot of cases of things like residual energy. So you've got the replay of images and things like that within the environment. Oftentimes the hauntings, if there's a cemetery haunting, it doesn't have to do with the cemetery itself. Oftentimes it has to do with the history of the property or the land or something like that, something that's gone on there. We've mentioned Greyfriars Kirkyard quite a lot on spiritual healthcare, and I'll bring that one up again because yet again we've got a situation where we've got a negative entity that is existing within Greyfriars Kirkyard. But when we look back at the history of that place, we can trace it back to an area that was used for quarantine for people that had the plague. So there was like quite a lot of negative emotional input into that space. And you kind of get this birth of this consciousness that comes out of it, and then it was turned into this cemetery. So there's you can kind of trace it back, but usually the hauntings, if you've got a haunted cemetery, it usually doesn't have to do with the fact that there's bodies. It has to do with like the history of the land and things like that. So we get a lot of people that, of course, you still see ghost hunters and things like that going out to cemeteries and sitting around gravestones and, with EVPs and stuff like that. And looking for spirits, but the reality is that that you can communicate with them at any point in time, anywhere. It doesn't really matter where you're going. And when we get something like a cemetery, or a morgue or stuff like that, you usually don't have the same level of activity that's going on that you'd think you would, and around that kind of thing. We've got an innate fear of dead bodies. We really do. And there's a good reason for it, because dead bodies and corpses are often very dangerous on a biological level. They emit diseases, they emit, gases. They're, rotting meat is, of course, not a good thing to be around and touching. Oftentimes, back in the day, people were dying from diseases and things like that, so you didn't want to be around the dead. So that's something just to really keep in mind. So we've got a very strong history of being afraid of dead bodies, being afraid of and not wanting to go near them, and for very good biological reasons. But you get a lot of stories that come out of that. Things like zombies, vampires, all of that kind of thing. There was a tradition, and I think it's in Scandinavia, where if somebody passes away in the house, you have to carry the body out in a certain direction, so that the body can't the person can't turn around and see where you're taking them. And so they can't come back to the house again once you bury the body. So there's plenty of cases and stories and things like that about the fear of death, and the fear of the corpse itself coming back. So that's really where the cemetery haunted home thing begins to become an issue. And we also have to remember too that when we've got a house that's next to a cemetery or anything like that, you're automatically putting yourself in a state of expectation, right? So if you've got these ideas and you've got these beliefs, we attract what we think about. We attract where, our expectations, where we put our focus and all of those things. We bring that to us. So we have to really be conscious of that as well, that our state of expectation, our state of belief will end up culminating into our experiences and filter out into our experiences as well. So I thought that was awesome. So the other question that I got, which was in direct relation to this, because I thought this was really great. It came from Dan, and I thought this was awesome. He said, a few times you've made mention of the dead not having unfinished business. And as of, let me just find it here. If they don't have unfinished business, then why a to-do list? The background on the deceased caretaker of somebody in death, still trying to take care of the individual, etc. So I love this question because it is really good, and a lot of people encounter this. A lot of people, talk about this idea of unfinished business and sort of the laboring spirit and things like that. And in parapsychology, we really have not found that to be the case, where they have, they're coming back because of some upsetting story or something like that. Because usually that's the story, right? That we're painted, is that somebody dies and they have this horrible laborious, experience, and they're coming back and they're upset, and they can't move on until they get something done. This type of thing, right? We get these long stories, and there's a big difference between that allegory versus the reality of what places like the Windbridge Institute has found, and different channelers over the years and all sorts of things like that, and different clients as well. Many clients that I've had, is that the non-physical, no matter who it is, they're always looking for that interaction. They really are, and they are there as a resource for us to help. All the time. If they've got information, they've got knowledge, they've got wisdom, there's so much there. And, and they seek to help, to have that connection, to have that relationship. So, oftentimes we do get messages, we do get communications, we do get all of those things. They will come, move in, and help us out during certain situations. And I think what we have to realize is that we always have that connection to them. That's not something that ever really goes away. Sometimes it becomes more prominent in other situations than others. Some people, as I say, will stick around until, another loved one passes away, or will show up in times of need, with information and stuff like that. So it's really, really intriguing. Like, we hear cases all the time of, situations where family, for example, where people are in danger, and, they get sort of an alert or something like that from an entity, that's basically, either keeping them out of trouble, all sorts of things. When, it was really interesting because when 9/11 happened, and you can look back on cases throughout that day, that morning, and there are hundreds and hundreds of cases of people that reported not, like, sort of getting that intuitive feeling, getting that connection, getting that little voice saying, do not get on the plane. Don't go into work today. You need to, they guide you. They will, non-physical guides you to, it doesn't guide you away from. So here's the big difference with messages and things like that from source, is that source is always leading us to a thing. It's always leading us to something. It doesn't necessarily, warn. It doesn't necessarily give us negative messages and that type of thing. What it does is it gives us the guidance to move to something else, to move to something new. So it doesn't ever come from this lack-based place where we often think it's going to. We think it's going to come from somewhere like somebody who is desperate for that, having that connection again, is mourning that connection, a spirit that's been that we think of as greatly suffering and needing that connection, and that's really not the case. What we end up finding, especially through notable institutions such as I say, Windbridge, and channels and things like that, is that we see over and over again these entities looking and seeking to have that connection, to have that dialogue, to be talking, to be interacting with one another. But it's always from a very different place than what the storybooks like to tell us. The storybooks and the cases that we hear about on television and things like that, they're always looking to create this sort of drama experience around the idea that people have passed over and can't move to the other side without completing this unfinished business or something like that. And that's really just not true. They will often hang around. They will often, wait for that connection, wait for that that opportunity to communicate. And they will do it using the path of least resistance. That's the other part of this. They will do it using that path of least resistance. So, if that other person, for example, is that path of least resistance, they'll find that other person and communicate that way. I had a interesting experience after Steph passed away. And it was a couple of years later. This was not like immediately after. But what would happen is that she had a friend. We had a mutual friend who had been a client at one point, and her name was Darlene. And I remember the one night I had a bunch of questions about things, and I had kind of put it out there and asked Steph. I can't remember what the question was now, but I asked Steph, and I was like, you know what, I'm just going to leave this up to non-physical, and we'll just see, and I forgot about it. I actually fell asleep and I forgot about it. And the next morning, I get a text message from Darlene, who I had not talked to in probably a good 5-6 years. And she texted me and she said, I had the weirdest thing happen last night. I was like, okay, well, what's going on? She's like, can I give you a call? So I ended up on the phone with Darlene for quite a while, because what happened was that her house went haywire. And she noticed that her iPod, which had not been like plugged in or charged or anything like that, started to turn on all by itself. It turned itself on, and it was pulling up a song over and over and over and over again that she hadn't listened to. It wasn't on her playlists. It was one of those songs that kind of fell into the back of her files. She just had no idea. And she was like, I don't know what this means. They tried to turn the iPod off, and it didn't work. It was like it kept coming back on again, and it did this all night, and her house just went crazy. And what was so interesting was that the song itself answered the question that I had the night before, indirectly. It was an absolute direct response to it. And it was so interesting to me, because it was a great example, in my opinion, of that question being let go. I was not the path of least resistance because I was still missing her. And I couldn't get up to speed with where she was because I was just not in the emotional place to be able to do that. But Darlene had absolutely no resistance at all. She had zero resistance, and she was allowing that to flow and allow that energy to just flow. She wasn't aware I asked the question. She wasn't looking for an answer, so she wasn't putting any resistance in that way either. And lo and behold, bam, this showed up, and she knew immediately, she said, that was for me. She said she had no idea why. As I say, I had not spoken to her in about 5 years. But all of a sudden, bam, like she knew immediately as soon as that started to go on. She's like, I have to call Morgan. I have to let her know. I think this is for her. So she knew right away. It was really interesting. And I won't forget it. And it's happened multiple times since. I've had it happen with my friend Patricia as well, where, you know, I've put something out there and then bam, she starts getting, you know, information and things like that. It's really intriguing. And Kaz is saying non-physical will find a way. It does. It always does. And it will find that way through path of least resistance. And oftentimes we put this story on it and think it's you know, it's somebody who is struggling or upset and it's unfinished business. But it really is, non-physical is always looking for that connection with us all the time. All the time. And whether or not we choose to go with it, that's a whole nother story. But sometimes other people can be that path of least resistance as well. It's really neat. And, you know, as we kind of move through the, you know, our physical experience here, we really get to know Source's motto, which is all is well and all is unfolding as it needs to. And that non-physical energy, there's never really a rush. There's never really a hurry. You know, it's every entity that has been, you know, that people have interacted with and things like that. You know, they want that connection, but at the same time, I think whether or not it affects them moving forward, you know, I don't believe it affects them, for example, crossing over. We hear that story a lot on TV. You know, I don't think that the energy that creates worlds needs our help to cross, to move energy from place to place. That just doesn't make any sense. It just, I think when you know, we get that information, when we get that message, when we get that, you know, if we feel that we're getting something that's in regards to somebody else, I think it's important that we take it seriously, that we, you know, we pass that information forward and whatnot. But I also think we have to be very careful about where we are receiving the information from. So here's the other half to this. Okay, so we've talked about non-physical, but let's talk about the receiver, right? So oftentimes what will happen is that, you know, we get people who are in a negative emotional space, right? They're not in a good space, or they've got they got some toxic stuff they got to clean up, whatever it is. And here's the thing, that if we are not in a good receiving place, the stuff that we end up receiving is not friendly. It's not good. It's not friendly. It's not helpful. It's not positive. It's not. So if we're getting, like, if we're finding ourselves, like, we're getting stuff that, like, you know, we sit down to you know, a session to channel or meditate, or, you know, whatever it is for you to connect in with non-physical, and you're getting messages that just aren't right, like they seem, you know, negative, or there's something going on. That's not you're not pulling information from a good space, and that's a you issue. That's not a non-physical issue. We have to remember that there are a whole pile of different frequencies that we can pull information from, and our set point of attraction is what is going to determine what messages and what radio station, right, we are tuning into. So we are not tuned into, you know, joy or pure positive energy and, you know, all, whatever it is, like that other end of the emotional scale. Then we have to realize that we are going to get messages that equal that point of attraction. And at that point, that's not stuff that you want to be spreading around. That's not stuff you want to be, you know, you want to be sharing. That's not coming from a place that's going to help other people. That's just coming from you know, a negative frequency. So something to really think about. Works both ways. It's crazy. Connor's asking, is it similar to the incident at Mackay Avenue School? Yeah, exactly. So what Connor's talking about is there's a place here in Edmonton, that's got a really interesting story and case. I'll see if I can find the video to that, because I think I have it on YouTube or something. It might be on YouTube. It has a very interesting story about a janitor who ended up conversing with a negative entity, and the relationship that got built between this janitor and this negative entity was extremely toxic, and it kind of went south from there. But the place itself ended up as my client for quite a while, and it's an amazing place, and they've gotten themselves so turned around now that the new people coming in don't know that it's haunted, which is really good, which is really cool. But it's quite the success story. But yeah, it was a very interesting connection. And the fellow who ran into trouble with this negative entity, it called itself Peter, had a lot of problems going on. He had just a lot of emotional imbalance from what we were able to understand. There was a lot of reports of some really toxic behavior from him and whatnot. And bam, it's like as soon as you start to get invested in that way, right, into non-physical, and you've got all that stuff going on, the stuff you're going to get is not conducive to anything positive. So I wanted to touch on the idea of transition and things like that in this is one of my favorite books. It's called Instinct by T.D. Jakes. The Power to Unleash Your Unborn Drive. We haven't read from this one yet, and it's one of my favorite books. He is brilliant, and I wanted to touch on a little bit about fear and looking back and understanding what we do moving forward. How do we beat the what ifs? How do we move into communication with this kind of thing? And how do we talk about our experiences in a new way? I really loved this, and I thought this was a great idea for this afternoon. This is pretty cool. So check this out. We're used to basing our decisions on past experiences, and then suddenly our instincts will pull us towards something equally tantalizing and terrifying. We cannot deny our instinctive attraction, and yet we're unsettled by its unfamiliarity. Nothing in our repertoire of achievements and abilities, nor our family, our training, our education, or our experiences has prepared us, and yet we are drawn instinctively towards something that excites us, touches us, energizes us, and leaves us shaking in our boots. From my experiences and those of many others, instinct likes a challenge more than it likes comfort. Our instincts would rather lead us to face the unknown than let us shrink into the corner of our cage. When we're committed to fulfilling our destiny, our instinct drives us away from complacency and towards contentment. An inmate leaving prison must certainly feel this odd mixture of excitement and fear as he walks through the door of his cell one last time through the gates of the prison grounds. What had become familiar to him, normal and routine, must now be left behind. He must start over. And as exhilarated as he may be by the restoration of his freedom, he also must make his way into a new jungle that has grown unrecognizable from what he knew before. In fact, many parolees and former inmates become so stressed trying to reacclimate to the outside that they often end up returning to crime. And I loved this bit because I think it's so key in terms of how we reshape our look on, say, the paranormal, our look on how we are moving forward out of this pandemic, out of quarantine right now, all sorts of things, but also in how we are shaping our view on things like non-physical communication as well. Instinct is so key with all of this, and it's the drive, it's the want to understand the unknown, the want to get those messages, the want to be that receptive mode. But how we start to move into the world and how we start to approach it, and what our expectations are of the paranormal, what our expectations are of spirit, all of those things all makes a big difference. And I think going forward into the next little while is something we have to really be mindful of. I think it's really cool. So the process that I wanted to give to you guys today was about cleaning up our unfinished business. What is it? How do we want to be doing this? And something to think about, is like, are we in the receiving place to be able to get that communication from non-physical and the communication that we want from non-physical? Are we able to do that? And are we, what is our state of expectation? Where are we receiving from? If we're getting stuff that's not so good, we got to think about that and figure it out. So it is about cleaning up our stuff so that we can tune in to the part of non-physical that will give us the best inspiration and the guidance and the instinct to pursue dreams and our futures and all of those things. So something to think about today anyway, as we start our week. So that being said, our morning affirmations, you guys, we got to do them before we like go into our day. So everybody take a breath. I'm a channel of peace and well-being, and my need for peace is abundantly met. I unconditionally accept, love, and appreciate myself and who I am. I recognize and am grateful for the abundance which is constantly flowing into my life, which I can choose to allow or not. I feel with every breath a sense of peace and love. I help others by maintaining and tending to connection with Source as much as possible. This well-being is accessible to me, even in a sea of uncertainty. And at this moment, all is well. I am able to liberate myself from my past and live with peace and serenity. I can see and appreciate all the beauty and abundance of the life around me. And I am able to embrace love while letting go of fear. I find peace with the soothing silence of my inner being. And everybody take a breath. I hope you guys have an amazing Monday. I will see you all tomorrow, Spiritual Healthcare, tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Mountain Time, as always. Hello to everybody that logged in that I did not see logging in this morning. So you guys can catch up. If you guys missed it, of course, this will be on youtube.com/entityseeker as well as entityseeker.ca shortly. And so you guys can replay it. And yeah, this will be a good day. I know it's going to be a good day, and it's going to be a good week. So let's go into this and let's get our day going, everybody. So have a wonderful one, and I will see you all tomorrow morning. Spiritual Healthcare. Bye, everybody.